Well, today the subject of today's class is Cascading Style Sheets, or CSS. It is the technology, the language, whatever you want to call it, that is used to describe how you want your web page to look. There's two general ways you can produce a style sheet: an internal style sheet or an external style sheet. You guys have already worked with internal style sheets. That's when you put a style tag on your page and you start putting styles within it. When you put an external style sheet on there, it works. The base CSS rules all work the same. The only difference is the browser will actually look at the internal style sheet before it looks at the external style sheet for deciding on how the elements you've described in that sheet are going to look. The basic syntax of CSS is as up there. You have a selector, which is also known as, or can also be called a. All right, whoever just joined, we just started, so you didn't miss much. Oh, okay. All right. So you have your selector, which is what's used to actually select your element on the HTML page. It's also can be called a descriptor. I'll be using a lot of the terminology, and stop me if I lose anyone on that, because the terminology is really important for being able to communicate fluently about what you're actually doing with it. Right now, Jason's going to give you guys that just got here copies of the HTML and CSS cheat sheets, and that will help you guys out when you're doing this. We don't expect anyone to actually remember all of this. It's just knowing where to go to look it up. It's an impossible feat to ever memorize all of this, the madness that is what programming is. So, like I said, you have your selector, and within your two brackets, you have different declarations of how you want your element to behave. And you guys have seen these before. They're property value pairs. In the example here, we have color, and we're setting it to blue. Color's the property, blue's the value. They're using font size. That's the property there, and the value is 12 pixels. Normally, it's the HTML element you want to style. The selector is. Okay. And now we're going to actually move into some of the basic selectors. And so, does everybody have Visual Studio open?
We did use an external style sheet last week in Visual Studios. Because when we first launched it,
right,
we had that one, we played with that.
Right, I had forgotten about that. You give him a sheet?
Yeah.
All right, in Visual Studio, in your Solution Explorer, just to kind of keep everything a little separated, right-click on the root of your project, the topmost item, and select New Folder. And when it creates that folder, go ahead and name that folder Learn CSS. All right, and after that, right-click on that new folder that you created and select Add New Item. And then go ahead and just select an HTML page out of the list that appears. And we're going to call that css.htm. Is everybody on the meeting with us so far?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so we have our css.html. Go ahead and click Add when you're done there. And I've already done it, so I'm hitting Cancel. And that should give you a page that we're going to be working primarily with the internal style sheet today. Since the external really functions no differently, it's just external. All right, to get started, go ahead and make your style tags inside of the head of your document. And we'll go into the different kinds of selectors.
Now, since we've touched on style sheets and styles so far in class, what are we going to learn different or above what we've learned so far?
Well, basically today the goal is to have you guys understanding the difference between a class selector, a ID selector. We're also going to go into pseudo-classes, attribute selectors, inline selectors, and element selectors.
Okay.
So you guys have all used a lot of these already, just in the examples that Jason's given you. But I want you guys to be able to identify them now, so that you know. And we're also going to go into understanding, like, if you have 4 different styles, defined styles that are going to be affecting an element, you should be able to, just by looking at them, understand which one's going to get its rules picked first.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. The first type of selector is the most general. It's the element type selector. So in our body, we're just going to go ahead and make a div real quick and put a little content in it. Now, if I wanted to select that div, I would use the word div up here, and that will successfully allow me to apply styles to that div. Now I'm going to give you an example here.
I noticed when you were typing, IntelliSense didn't come up, but then I also I've been using your shortcut, your shift space?
Shift or control space.
Control space, and automatically brings it up if Visual Studio is not launching it automatically.
Right. After you've used it a really long time, you actually start to see the outline form, and then you just hit tab, because 9 times out of 10 it's going to get it right, especially in the HTML stuff.
Okay.
All right, so I've created 2 divs. I'm going to show them to you here. Oops. Here's what they look like without styles. Just 2 contents on a page. With the outline style applied to them via our CSS style sheet here, they just get a solid black outline. Now, say I wanted the second div to actually be differentiated from the first one in our page. Is everybody with me so far?
No, I'm not.
Where are you at on your...
I didn't get on in the beginning.
Okay, do you need to, make the page, or...
You're on default ASPX. Are you not seeing your Solutions Explorer? Were you here last week? You're welcome, right? Go ahead, go click on view at the top.
Okay, we got one of them fixed. He thought he had
Toolbar
both of them fixed, but I
or
just
other windows.
double-checked and
Go to view, other windows.
showed me the page that's 317, 417.
Solutions Explorer. Okay, so right click at the top, create a new folder, or right click on the C:/. That's the root of your project. Go add new item.
4132904.
Go to HTML
That
page.
one is still not showing in advanced schedule. It is in the notes and everything, but it is not showing the actual schedule date. So we'll probably hear about it before you will, because they're going to say, oh, it's a software problem, so they're going to call us. So, right.
Okay, so
And
what's that?
the
Can you see it okay?
Yeah, I can increase the font if anyone needs me to. Happily.
The code or the IE window? Bob?
list
Code.
of
Yeah.
all the duplicates, multiple orders.
Ooh, that's a bit too
Just
much.
for this month. And it's like, one of them is in there 10 times. They've got one order in there 10
Sam, can you
times.
play
I'm
your
like,
CSS Explorer?
how do you do that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah.
All I did was I created a folder by right-clicking the topmost element there in that list that the Solution Explorer gives you. You just right-click that and click New Folder. And then I right-click the folder itself that I had just created and added a new item for our new HTML document.
We had the issue with it updating today. He didn't actually put anything in the ticket, so I still got to get with him to find out if fix that or what the problem was there, or if I need you to give me the list so we can go in and clean it up, or how we need to handle that, because he actually did put that in the ticket. And
Sam.
one,
Yes.
we keep data clicks for like
Um,
2 week
I'm
periods.
kind of in the same place that
And I took that.
River was asking about that. I created the folder called Learn CSS. How do you get the new, when you right click on that, what do you choose as the new?
Add new item, and then select HTML page from that list.
Oh, okay.
And I just named mine CSS.html. Yeah, and this is just the default page. I've so far I've added this style tag here, and these two divs down here that we're actually working with.
Okay. Okay.
If you're going to add more, should you go and put the div all in one line
Well, that's
and make your tabs like 2 spaces? I'm just trying to think to put more on the board.
oh
That
right.
should go further.
Well, I'm probably going to just use the word wrapping and just hit enter a whole lot to try and keep it all.
Okay.
This might be an opportunity to
Well, yeah, they don't need that. Everybody has that.
difference between browsers. Because what you have up right there, the outline doesn't show up now.
Should take a look.
Or at least I know.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, we'll do something with them tomorrow. Okay.
Is it in the order that I put it up there? Solid 1 pixel black.
You have 8.
Yeah, it might be.
works in 8 and 9, but not 9 while it's in compatibility mode.
Well, we can.
No, it's just Microsoft compatibility mode.
Yeah. I just picked outline because there's actually a that's one of the styles that is best used when you're trying to visualize elements. Because a border, if you all look at the and I'll make sure that these cheat sheets get emailed to you guys. So just try and wing it with us. If I refer to the cheat sheet, if you look at the CSS cheat sheet, there's actually a picture there of what's called the box model. And that's a representation of how the browser actually sees all of those CSS styles that we've worked with in the past. They're on my desktop. The last 2 files on my desktop. But basically, if you see where you have the hit white, the width and the height, those actually aren't measured to include your margins in your margins there. Now, the same rule applies for border. That inner box that the height and width are taken off are actually what's going to get the border applied to it, but not the margin, which is still part of the element and will be treated like part of the element. Outline, however, goes around the entire width of the element. That's why it's really great for visualizing where your elements begin and end when you're actually working with them. Okay, so we've created an element selector. We have both of our divs styled. They have our black outlines, and we decide that content 2 needs to have a red background because it's that special. So I'm going to firstly give this div a class attribute, which is the handy CSS attribute for marking it as being having a CSS class applied to it, and we're going to name it red. So this div has a class of red. And there's a reason it's named it's called class. I'm not 100% sure to be able to give you the definition, but it's better to just know that it works rather than how it works. All right, and now up here in our style sheet, we're going to actually create our class named red. Now, in order to mark something a class, we start with a period, and then you have your class name. So the selector for this is .red, or is red. Okay, we're going to go with our brackets, and we wanted to give this a background color. That is red, of course. And if we save and then execute this code, it changes our second one to being red. Now, say we have a third element. This div is actually going to function as a menu. And because we're working with it with JavaScript, we're going to be using JavaScript to make this menu work. We want to give it an ID of menu. He's over there. And inside of it, we're just going to make a real quick unordered list. That's the UL tag, and then within each of the within that UL, we're going to make a list item, which is the LI tag. And for a interesting little side note for when you're working in Visual Studio, if you want to copy an entire line, just move your cursor to that line, and I gotta test this myself, and hit copy. And then when you hit paste, it will paste that entire line for you. Always above wherever your cursor is sitting. As you can see, I pasted, and the copied text has moved above my cursor. All right. I'll give you guys a moment to catch up with your markup here. I'm actually looking up something for the next bit here. There we go. Just all right. If we all have our markup, we're going to now we want to actually change what is happening to our div that contains our unordered list. As you can see, that because it is also a div, it is being affected by our div style. Because that style has selected, it selects every element and applies these styles to it. It's not being affected by our red class because we have not told it that it is part of, that it actually has to have that class applied to it. So how do we tell it just for this one style, this one element on our page? That we do not want to have that outline. We're going to be doing a special menu that an outline would actually ruin. Well, we would use the ID selector, which is the hash on your keyboard, followed by the ID of the element. So as you can see, my div has the ID of menu, and I represent that selector with hash menu. And then I go into my CSS, and I remove my border. Okay. These three right here primarily are what you're going to be using when styling a web page. You'll, depending on what you want to happen, if you wanted to, instead of just putting a border on all the divs, say you wanted to, everything you put into a div, you want to have a particular margin. And that would apply a certain amount of space around every single one. Now, then you get into classes where you're actually selecting groups or particular elements, just like you do with the ID selector below it. Now, you'd wonder why in the world you would want to use both class and ID selectors. And that's because if you were to use just ID selectors on your page, you would have to include every single ID that you want it to be affected by this CSS style. And I used this to kind of show you the comma, which is a good way to say or in CSS. So if I wanted this to affect menu or other menu, I would separate my selectors with the comma. And the space is not necessary, but it helps for readability. Now these selectors can actually be stacked in different ways. Say I wanted to only affect the divs that I have given the red class. I would do div, that's still an element selector, dot red. So that means every div that has the class red on it. And that does count as two separate selectors. And we'll just go ahead and throw our border back on that we removed with our earlier example. So now one of the questions you may have is, let's say that in my HTML, inside of this div, I have content there, but I also have a paragraph that has additional content. Now, rather than going through the pain of moving this class to that, we can use an element selector along with our red class and do space P. When you specify any selector and then put a space followed by another selector, that is like saying I am looking for the child element that's represented by this next selector. So that particular selector that I used here would grab the P tag that is within something that is styled with that has the class attribute set to red. And we want that to have font size. We're going to make that 1.5 size the default font of the page. Actually, an interesting point. I believe I kind of gave you guys a definition off the top of my head of what that EM stood for either last week or the week before. And that is literally something that was brought over from typeface. It's the width this symbol EM stands for the width of the letter M in the default font size and the default line height. So if you set your page's default font to, we'll select our body tag and do font size 16 pixels. That will then be used as the default font size for all calculated fonts. And this would be considered a calculated font, sort of like using a percentage. This would be exactly the same as doing this. I'm pretty sure.
Or 1.5 times of 16. So
right. Or
24. Okay.
Yeah, or doing 24.
24 pixels.
All three of those would have the same effect.
So it doesn't do 1.5 times its parent. It does 1.5 times the page.
It does 1.5 times. Well, it's the context that it's currently in. If the parent has a font size attached to it, it will use that one.
So your div up top says, your div says 3 EM, So would that make the red 3 plus 1.5 of 3?
It's the first non-calculated. That's a good point.
So the calculation doesn't stack.
Right.
It's the first non-calculated one it comes to.
Right.
Okay.
So it takes whatever solid or uses the default and runs off of that for all the calculated font size.
So our paragraph should be actually smaller than the div text.
Right.
If the div's 3EM.
Oh, the div, the 3em is the margin.
Oh,
That's another thing that it's useful for, is you can have the same measurements that scale appropriately when browsers that support zoom are actually used to display the page. Because if they're increasing the font size by 200% on the browser side, you don't want your margins to go all screwy, and you'll lose your line heights and everything will be squished together. It'll look simply awful. If you use the M to represent your widths and your heights for margins, and once you have all that set up, that will actually scale appropriately with any zooming that's being done to that page.
Okay.
All right, so we have our selector for our P tag inside of our red div. And that has given us additional content. Now, as you can see, the default font size is our 16 pixel font, and this font size is 1.5 times as large as that one. All right, so how does it decide what to do? Because given what we've already gone over, we should be able to just go and still select the same P tag. So we grab the body, select a div within it, and a P tag within that. That would be our body, a div within it, and the P tag within that. So let's see what that actually does. Nothing changes. This is actually because it's a cascading style sheet. There is a term called specificity. It's really hard to say, but it's not too difficult to understand. Basically, it means that each one of these different types of tags have rules and point values associated with when the browser actually goes through and decides what to actually display. Like an element selector has this value. And I'll actually get into what each of these mean once I have them all shown here. You don't have to type this into your code. These are just mostly for notes. The next one are classes, pseudo-classes, which we will go into, and attribute selectors, which we will also go into. Those are considered more specific, so they have the value that. After that, we have the ID selector, or the ID type. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say selector. The term there is called a descriptor. It's because it's what it describes. So an ID descriptor would be this right here. That right there has a value of that right there. And an inline style has the value of that. Now, I've ordered this list like this, going from least specific to most specific. And a browser will always choose the most specific style to use. So in our example here, we can actually calculate how specific our two statements are here. We'll start with the first one. The first one's a red. That's a class type selector. So that gives us a 1 here. Now, it also uses an element selector, which changes our math to also put a 1 there. This one below it is similar, but not exactly the same. It actually has a 3 because it is using 3 element selectors. Now, why was this chosen? Because in this list, this one is less important than this one, which is less important than this one, which is less important than this one. So no matter how many element type descriptors you have, a class will always trump it. Now, to give you, just comment this out here.
So if you gave that paragraph an ID with a different font size, that would trump even the class.
Yes, if I were to give that paragraph an ID, we'll show you the example. ID equals small. And I were to go up here and do smaller, or even to go a little bit more specific, I could do a P smaller. We would actually see our style take effect because we have given it something that is more specific than our .red P tag selector. All right, now you guys heard me mention two more types of descriptors that we haven't gone over yet. Those are the pseudo-class and pseudo-element. I don't know if I mentioned pseudo-element, but that's what we're going over. Descriptors, and those are the ones that you might have seen before. Using A tags. That is the colon hover is a representation of what's called a pseudo-class. Now, you could accomplish exactly what this hover does with JavaScript by changing the class of the A tag to be hover, to have hover within it. And you would be able to accomplish this red text. We'll do blue since we've used a lot of red. And we will go ahead and make a quick A tag right here. I'm going to save. And barring any unforeseen typos, whenever I hover over, I don't know if you, let me see, make sure. Whenever I hover over that A tag, do white. That will make it much more visible because I can't see it from here, so I was worried you guys couldn't. So as you can see, when I hover there, the pseudo class takes over. The browser itself actually adds a class to that A tag and provides that sort of pseudo functionality so that I wouldn't have to take the extra time necessary to apply these classes with some sort of JavaScript or client-side programming. There are other ones. I know before you've also seen active, which is actually the state of anything that of actually being clicked. So when I'm hovering over something, the color changes to white because I'm setting that in the hover pseudo-class. Whenever I'm actually clicking it, the browser has the same behavior of applying an active class to that element. So we're going to go ahead and change that to green. We're going to save and go over our linked content. Make sure I got my latest. So here I'm hovering and it's turning white. When I click it, you see it actually turns green. That's because the tag has actually activated and been clicked. As long as I hold in that button, I am still active on that link as far as the browser is concerned. Another good one for when we're doing forms and things like that is for inputs. Say I have 4 input boxes that have very careless use of, or lack of use of, quotes around my attributes. If I were to, say, use the focus pseudo class, I could give them a background color of yellow, for instance. And you ask, what purpose does any of this serve? And really, it's the purpose of keeping your user interested in your page, because that is what CSS is about. If we didn't need CSS, we wouldn't have any users. Or if we didn't have any users, we wouldn't need CSS, rather. But people have actually sat down and done all the research to figure out, what behaviors do we need to make default in every single browser in order to allow developers to keep the attention of their user. Anything that keeps you clicking that next button or that next ad or anything on the web, your click is worth money. All right, and these are the 3 most popular pseudo classes that you'll actually see used in many sites.
There's a whole list of them there on the cheat sheet.
Right. If you refer to that, there is, and you guys can play with these. I believe they work on every element. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure they work on every element. Now, you see some other ones on there, such as first child and first line, first letter. Those are what's called pseudo-elements, because they actually take on the behavior of the browser adding a new element to your page. So say I wanted to take my P tag up here that has its special additional content, and I really want to make that A stand out. Now I could, for all intents and purposes, do this. And on every single paragraph on my website, put that element, which would make a lot of work for me. Or I could take advantage of the fact that the browser will do it for me. And now you'll see this written 2 ways, one with a single colon or with a double colon. The W3 has specified that the classes have singles and elements have doubles, but most browsers, all the major ones, will work with just a single colon out there. So if you see a double colon whenever you're looking on a website, don't let it confuse you. It's just a preference of how you want to type it. So we're going to do first letter, and we really want that one to pop, so we're going to do font 350%. Do it. And as you can see right there, though it'll never show in your markup, the browser treats that like it has a special element around it that applies a 350% font markup. Is there anyone that that's not with us so far? Okay. Well,
Can I ask a question about the first line?
absolutely.
If I had a paragraph and I had, some text and a BR tag and some more text, does the first line just apply to the first line? Does the browser know that the BR tag sets the second line?
Let's actually test that. I've never tested that. So we will throw some more content in there and then put a BR. And then we're going to go up here and we're just going to change our selector, because that's the glory of CSS. If you want to change something that's going to affect everything else on your site, you're changing it in one place. You don't have to worry about your inline styles and did I change it on this, on the 30 times that I put it on this page, or the 700 times that I put it on this group of pages. You just change it in one. So we'll just change that to first line. And we're going to give that a test. All right.
So in fact, it did it not on the break. It did it where
It did it where it represents the first line. So I'm sure if I increase the width of my page and change that first line,
okay.
it
So
will.
it's dynamic. So it's either going to do the break or where it normally routes to a second line.
Right.
All by itself.
It will do the first line no matter what. Yeah.
That's really neat, considering it doesn't know where the break is
Right.
ahead of time, depending on the size of the element.
Right. And this is actually managed in the guts of the browser. So as your browser, because every single time I move my mouse here, the browser has to go through painting this page, rewriting everything so that it fits within the rules that the page is defined. So it takes care of applying those rules at the actual time that it's, it's resizing or when it's painting in the initial. All right. If no one has any questions, I think we're going to take a quick break. And we'll resume in about 15 minutes.
Does anybody need any help with anything? No, you'll probably give this out to the class after. Send this out via email
Yes.
to the class?
Yes, it's going to go out digitally. And
Not necessarily the cheat sheet, but your page when we're done tonight.
yes. Does anyone need me to slow down, or is there anything that was unclear? Because I'm trying to move at a pace that works for everybody, and it's like I said, this is my first time doing it. So
You guys can face this one long?
Yeah.
It works.
Hey Jason.
Yeah.
This version of Express is supposed to be unlimited license, right? Because when I logged in here or opened it up, it said 20 days.
I got the same thing.
Yeah, you gotta get a registration number.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a free registration.
Is it free registration? You still have to register?
Always
You gotta
free.
register and they send you an email with a registration code and you gotta,
Okay.
Okay, as long as it's free out.
Okay.
yeah.
And then they're doing their marketing. They're giving it away free, but they want something in return. They want to know who you are, what you're using it for, and
That makes sense. Okay. Can you scroll that up to where he's like the style of the ID tomorrow?
yeah, I can make that. Here. This here, or
Where he's got the styling for the ID equals smaller class, whatever.
like that?
Yes, that one.
Yeah. Yeah, for the ID, it's a pound symbol, and for a class, it's a dot.
How far did you get on your loading? Is it? Yeah. Yeah, it's not fast to load. The video? Yeah. Yeah, he's posts on YouTube, but we also, like I've been giving this page out. So once this page is all done and you have it, you can throw it right into your project. Yeah.
What's it under on YouTube?
What's that?
What's it under on YouTube?
Go to YouTube and search for Code Furnace.
It's all one word, right?
I believe so. I'll see if I can try to find it too. Yeah, OVO classes, so it's on the Code Furnace. The thing is, since these classes are 3 hours long, he's sometimes you get them started and it takes them 2 hours to process. Okay. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up homepage, HTML. Actually, I'm going to edit it, open it with Notepad. Okay, so right now all we have is the JavaScript. He still has last week's video of Visual Studios to upload, as well as tonight's.
Jim, you still with us?
Yeah, I'm not caught up with what you had typed in here.
Do you need me to show any particular piece of code?
There, the first line, I did that.
Oh, okay. Here, let me do that for you.
First line. Oh, now it's stopped. Can you scroll down to the body section?
Absolutely. Just tell me when. Sorry.
Down.
Interesting. On your cheat sheets, guys, there's an even clearer description than the garbled one I gave you of the EM, which is one EM is equal to the font size of its parent, same as doing 100%.
Scroll up just a little bit more.
Sure. Oh, this way?
Yeah. Class. Yeah. That's good.
I'm not sure if you told him, Sam, but no class Monday, the 31st, Halloween. We won't be having class.
All right, you still need to see what's up there, Jim?
I got it. Thanks.
Oh, you're welcome.
Are we open for that one?
Yeah.
Ryan doesn't have it on my schedule. Was it? I don't think we closed it.
No, we're open. Just, I think I'm going to Barista's party. Do you know if they're having it on Halloween?
Saturday.
They're having it Saturday. Oh, that bites. We're having one too. You got a lot of competition there, Sam.
I know.
Just gonna have to have free alcohol there.
Oh, wait, too late.
We won't have an icing machine.
Yeah,
I think we
Bristol's.
should start here, and then we should trick or treat our way over to Bristol's.
Yes. There we go. That sounds good. All right. Now, I said earlier we're going to create a menu, and I intend on keeping that promise. So, now that I've shown you all the different selectors, we're actually going to put them to good use. Well, we're going to put them to use. I don't know how good it's going to be.
So you have LI inside of a UL that's inside of an LI.
Yes. What I've done here is I've created a sort of markup that kind of represents what we want our menu to do. Basically, it has an unordered list, which is a UL. And that's just the list with the bullets instead of the numbers. And it has 3 list items. So here's 1, 2, and 3. And within the first list item, it has another unordered list containing 2 more list items within it to sort of give us a kind of a tree structure. and you should always save if you want to see what your markup looks like. And this is what it produces on the page. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I think that's a pretty awful menu. So what we're going to do, and I will going to actually, there's a trick in Visual Basic. If you guys can kind of see this icon up here above the scroll bar, if you click and drag that, it actually allows you to split the screen, so you can see two places in the same code at the same time. This is just a usability feature. It's not important to your code at all. It just allows you to see, say, markup while you were working with styles. And to remove that split, you just drag it all the way back up to the top. So I'm going to go here in my style sheet, and because I care about my sanity down the road, I'm going to put a comment in here, and I'm going to note that it is the menu styles after this comment. So we have our div ID'd menu. We don't necessarily need to specify the div, so we'll just go with the menu selector. We're going to throw a space bar, or we're going to throw a space in there and then select the UL that's within that div. And that will grab both this UL here and this UL. And since menus typically do not have bullets, we are going to change the list style type of the unordered list. And as you can see, what I did is earlier I searched style list item, and I had to look up the exact style that we would be using. So we're just going to copy that from W3, paste that into place, and change its example code to be the code that reflects what we want. And when that will, and once we save, you'll be able to see that we have removed the bullets from our menu. Now, a menu needs to be clickable. So we need to take everything that we want to actually be able to click and put A tags around it. So why don't you guys go ahead and do that now. I will show you a quick trick to do it. If you look up the screen, if you highlight the text within it, right click and select Surround With, it will give you a little pop-up menu. You select HTML, and then you can select an A tag, and that will give you the markup surrounding the text that you had highlighted. So go ahead and use the Surround With to throw some A tags into your markup there. Now, since everybody should have their A tags in by now, we're going to go ahead and do things to them to make them fit into what we want them to look like in our menu. So we start with the menu, because we don't want this to actually affect anything else. We're going to keep it inside of the menu div element. So we'll go ahead and just do menu A. And if you're wondering how the formatting happens, all I'm doing there is after I type my open and close brace, I just hit enter. And Visual Studio will put that formatting in there for you. Did we lose someone?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He was asking if this was going to be on YouTube.
Yes. I'll make sure it goes up with the other ones immediately after the class. Okay, so we've selected our A tag, and we want it to, well, we want first to have a background color, because I like menus that have the nice square block look to them, sort of resembling what we see in our browsers and things like that. So we're going to do a background dash color, and we're going to make those blue with white text. Now, as you can see on the A tags here, all of the ones I created are the same color and the same basic styling of the text. I don't like the underline, so we're just going to change the text decoration to none, which will remove our underlining. And then I have a link that's also to Google. I don't want people to think that that's actually to somewhere on my site. So I'm going to introduce a new type of pseudo-element and class here. And this is the after pseudo selector. So we start with our selector here, pick our A tag, and pick after. Now, normally this would grab all of the text inside of the A tag, but rather than just select it, I want to actually inject content. And that's done using the content property, and within it you can pass I lost it. You can pass text with HTML in it. You can create separate variables outside in your CSS to actually throw things into it. But for the most part, you'll actually see people just using text to try and put things in here. You don't really have to worry about using counters or various values and things like that. We just want to put text in there. Ooh. So that seems like it has affected all of our links, but we just wanted it to affect our Google link. Now this is where we get into the very last type of descriptor, which I mentioned only briefly, called the attribute descriptor. And this will allow CSS to decide based on an attribute which elements it grabs to apply its styles to. And this is just done with the square brace. And within that square brace, we would grab our href attribute, and we're going to say the one we want is going to equal http://google.com. And then our pseudo element comes into play against that newly selected set of elements that match an href having Google's address.
Do you have to pass in the full value, or can you do like an include?
It is possible to do a text-based search, and this is essentially what it is. It's a search. You're telling CSS to search. Oh, here, let me increase the font size again. I forgot to do that. All right. So this would produce an exact. It would only match an exact representation of what we have in here. So it will first look at the menu div, because it's ID menu. It'll grab all of the A tags, and because this bracket follows it without a space, it's going to then search all those A tags for their attribute href, having an exact value of http://google.com. Then it will select the tag after that found element, which is a pseudo tag, as we discussed earlier. So let's kind of see what that does. Now, as you can see, I have my submenu 1, my submenu 2, and then my external link, Google. Now, external link has been placed at the end. That's not quite what I want, and I don't have to accept that, because after has a little brother named before, and that gives us the ability to move that to before the actual contents of the element that it selected. So here we have our submenu. It's kind of set up. Goes to google.com. We're happy about that. After that, we kind of want to get this looking a little bit more like it would actually be a menu.
Sam,
Yes.
my external link doesn't show up in the text for that.
Do you have quotes around?
Yeah.
And
He
it's.
has the brackets. He has really looks just like yours. Okay, so did you save and refresh?
I'm pretty sure I did. Maybe. Look. Alright.
Oh, you have an extra O in Google.
Oh. I guess I didn't know that.
In your link. Yeah. And that's one of the drawbacks to actually using that exact search. The equal symbol means if you typed it in there, you mean it. Now, say we don't want to have only links to Google to our site. We have a whole bunch of different search engines that we want to provide our users with links to. But we don't want to have to specify this line 7 different times for every different search engine that we could possibly ever want. In that case, if you look on your cheat sheets, it's not there, it's made me a liar. We're going to use, I believe it's the pipe, which is above your enter key. And that will actually allow you to change your search string to just be something like HTTP. Yeah, pretty sure that's right. That is not right.
You do have CSS2 selectors on the first page.
Does it have the...
It's kind of like that, but yeah, it has like equals X or tilde equals X or pound or slash equals.
Well, begin. Yeah, it is begin.
So yeah, you did the slash equals when it begins with. Okay, so that means where it begins with HTTP, which it does.
And for some reason, it's not working. href begins with.
Doesn't matter if you have double quotes versus single quotes.
Shouldn't, but we'll try it. That's the wrong page. All right, we'll see if, and this could even be an issue with browser support, because some of these selectors are getting into the fringes of CSS, and the whole reason I'm showing them to you is because they will actually be very valuable when we get into jQuery, which is a JavaScript library that makes up for browser shortcomings and allows you to use all of these selectors without concern that it's not going to work in some browsers. Now, I changed my code slightly. I changed it to use the star, which is basically the CSS's way of saying, hey, if the string HTTP is anywhere in the href attribute on an A tag, within the menu, within an element with the ID of menu, then I need you to select that. And the pseudo element that I want you to select comes before any other content within that element, within that A tag that you have decided to choose. That way I can do an example like this. And have my pseudo class that applies my external link text to any of those. And if I even wanted to, it would be just as simple to pass in HTML to this. Because you're creating a pseudo element on the page and telling it what content that element needs to have, you can specify HTML and the browser will honor that statement. Or not. I'll have to get back to you guys with that one.
It did put it in, or did
it put it in literally. And I think there's another rule that I don't know off the top of my head that's actually causing that to not work like I intended it to.
Can you put it outside the quote?
Maybe. Let's try it. No.
Nope, that was all together. Okay.
All right. Well, for all intents and purposes, just text, no HTML. I'm sorry for any confusion that causes. Does everybody understand? Like, I know this is this statement right here is a lot to swallow all at once. Is there any clarification necessary for anyone? Or does anyone need time to get it all copied down with what we're doing so far? All right. I'm going to move on to let's actually start thinking about styling our individual blocks so that it actually looks like a menu rather than a very scary looking unordered list. So we will menu, of course. We want to grab the list items, and we're going to layer layer styles onto these list items because we have certain visual cues that we want to appear on every single one, such as margin of 3 pixels, a border that is solid 1 pixel blue. We'll go yellow because we already used blue. We also want a width of, let's say, 30. No, we don't want that. 30 pixels. We'll just hard code the width this time. Oh no. We'll use the EM. We'll do it. The width is 200%. Will be 200% of the width of the string within it. So we'll do 2EM. And we'll save and sort of get a look at what everything turns into. Not quite.
It may look different if you expand that page out, though, too.
Yeah, that's true. That's what we call an angry page.
Well, scroll up on that page a little bit. I think you're stuck with inside another confine. No, wrong. Okay.
Well, right inside here, on the outside of the div, we've applied a margin. Right here, where we've actually taken the margin on all the divs and done 3EM. Well, I don't like how it's affecting my menu, so I'm going to use a pseudo-class that I'm not sure is on your cheat sheet, and I'm just using it mainly for the purposes of this class and to kind of get you an exposure to it so you can see it. If you see it again, you'll know what it is. And this is called the negation selector. It's simply enough. You create this markup here, which is colon, not parentheses, and within the parentheses, you put another selector. I, in this case, am using the menu. So what this changes this declaration to be is I want you to grab all the divs except for the one that has the ID menu.
Adjust that width to EM. I wonder if that's causing the width to be so small and everything wrapping.
Perhaps. Oh yeah, that is what's causing it. Yeah, that is. You're absolutely right. I'm just going to go ahead and take a pixel value. when all else fails. Let's see how that looks.
So it was doing the width of 2 characters, or 100% of the width of 2 M's, right?
Right.
Okay.
And so as you can see here, I have all of my LIs have taken on that new style. My A tags, however, don't match, and my A tags are where I put my background color. Now, since I do want them to match, I go up here to where I've decided that I'm specifying everything about my A tags, and I'm going to take their width to 100% of their parent. And that did not work like I intended it to. So, what I will do is take my background color, and this is exactly what happens when you're sitting there coding a page. You're not always going to know exactly what it's going to look like because you're sitting down, you're coding a page. This type of incremental development is always going to guarantee that you'll have the least headache by the time you're done, and B, it'll make sure you don't have to know every single thing about what you're trying to produce before you actually produce it. Because I know if I had to research in every single aspect of pages I develop before I actually produce them, that would take a lot of the fun out of programming. And we're also going to try moving our width up to our A tag so that it stretches our LI out instead of our LI needing the A tag to reach its ends. Because as you can see, my cursor becomes a clickable item over top of the actual text of the A tag, but once I get into the LI, I lose my pointer. It goes back to the default arrow, which is not clickable. I don't want that to happen because menus, typically you can click anywhere on them and they work. Okay. All right. Now we have a reason for Firebug. Whenever you're coding and you hit something it's not behaving like you intend it to, it's really helpful to pull out Firebug or something like it and actually see what's going on with your code. So I see what I've done here. I've given it a margin of 3 pixels. It's being stretched out to 407. My A tag, however, is not taking on my the width that I intended it to take. And so we kind of play around and massage the values until we actually get an idea of what's causing our issue.
So you're trying to figure out why it's so wide, right?
Yes, it's taken on a life of its own. Actually, I think it's because my width was originally being constrained by that. That is actually what's happening. There we go. Yes. Now, during the next break, I'll figure out why our A tags aren't traveling clear to the end, which, like I had wanted them to.
Click on the link and see what the width of the link is by itself.
It's 79. So as you can see, the width is not having any effect on it.
No.
And this is one of the powerful parts of Firebug, is the ability to actually go into these styles here and kind of turn them off and watch your code flash to actually see what is what's making a mess of things. All right. Well, we have our basic look of our menu done, and we're going to kind of get into now how exactly to make it react when the user actually goes over it, and that gets into our pseudo-classes. So we have our menu li, and we want to give it some sort of hover, and we want that hover to change the background color to yellow. Now you'd say, why does this menu li, or how would this work, since they both have menu li, which have the same scores when we calculate the specificity of these two statements. The tiebreaker is the pseudo-class. Like I said, it counts as just another class, so this would actually have a score of 0, 1, 1, 1. And this would have a score of 0, 1, 0, 1, because it has no class. And since it has that one extra point here, it's going to get more priority over the list item whenever that hover pseudo-class is being applied by the browser. So I can show you what that is. Now here's an interesting behavior. When I mouse over one of the inner list items on my my menu with a submenu, both list items turn yellow. The one that is topmost and the one that is a child of it. Now that's not necessarily a behavior I want. So I'm going to actually change my code right here to take it a little bit more specific. And I'm actually going to employ a class. as you can see, it then takes on the behavior that I want.
Now, did you lose the hover on? You also lost the hover on your other menus, though, right?
I in fact did. Which would make that not good. So using our class there would not solve the issue that we have.
Unless you also added to the other li elements.
Right. So we need to actually figure out a way to force this outside of the parent list element that is being governed by it. Or just accept the fact that our element, our parent element, will always glow right along with our child element, which in a lot of cases is what people do. Now, I wouldn't necessarily choose yellow for that. So since we have that behavior and we want to make an adjustment for it, we're going to change our border to gray. That way we can still give them a visual cue, but it won't be so darned hard to read. I'm going to also, on our hover, I'm going to also change our text color, since that also is very hard to read. Now, here's where I actually ran into an issue. As you can see, it's not taking my black text like I want it to. It is on the LIs, but not on the A tags. The reason for that is, higher up on the page, with the same score sits another element, an A tag selector, with the pseudo-class selector hover, giving it exactly the same score as my LI hover. Now, you'd think that because the I'm also adding into the menu, but it's also going to take into account that A tag is
part of the div.
Yes, is part of the div. Sorry,
Okay.
I lost my place in the code and I was trying to find it. So we are going to change that to also command our menu A's. Oops. And that would then give our menu A's the behavior that we want. When we hover over them, they go back to white because A tags are told to always be white. Unless we up here specify that in the menu we want A tags to take on a different behavior. So this is white. All right. After I massaged that a little bit, what was happening was because that was an A tag and it was inside of the LI, it wasn't getting the color black when I just moved my mouse over to off of the A tag. So when I was hovering over it, it turned black, but when I wasn't, it was not behaving like I had intended it to. So I added to our descriptor, our selector, an additional descriptor to grab the A tags within the LIs while the user's hovering, of course inside the menu div. And also apply that color black and the background yellow. And as you can see, it's coming along. We still have a little bit of work left to do as far as taming that background color. Let's see if that actually does more what we want.
So it does a complete LI down below, but not on your submenu items, right?
Yes. It looks like actually it's triggering the A hover whenever any LI that it's applying this to any A within it.
That's right, because your main parent is also an LI, and you're hovering over the main one. So the same reason your main one is highlighted, all of your A tags inside the main one are also being highlighted.
Right. We're going to leave that as is right now, and go on a break, and I will then go into a way to actually show and hide these using a little bit of JavaScript and our CSS. Does anyone have any questions?
I was thinking about, because all the specificity issues, does Firebug or any other application like maybe kind of give you a report?
It doesn't give you particularly that table that I showed you, but it does give you something similar. You kind of, as you can see right here when I'm hovering over this A tag, it shows the most specific first in this list, this style list, and goes down to the least specific that's affecting it. So here's the body tag. It's actually inheriting this font size from the body tag. It puts a line through something that's ignored because of being overwritten by something that's more specific.
So that's a hierarchy from the most specific on the top to the least specific on the bottom. And if it hasn't been overwritten, then it's not
Crossed out.
Crossed out. So that's why the body 16 pixels is still being shown,
Right.
because that's still in play.
And if I wanted to see exactly what the browser was computing for all of my styles, I'm going to break this out because it makes it a little easier to see. I could actually switch to the computed tab in Firebug, which is right beside style, and go through and see what, given all of the browser's defaults and all of the settings that the user may have done to the browser, this is what the browser's coming up with when it says, hey, how do I display this? You won't have to go in here a whole lot unless you're having some really crazy issues. 9 times out of 10, just sticking to this style tab will help you figure out what's happening. But if, say, you don't apply a margin, and for some reason your margin top is being set to 3 pixels by some browser default, you could actually see that here in Firebug.
You'll see that it's a 3, but will it tell you where it's coming from?
Well, it won't. But through deductive reasoning, you can see that you're not actually, like, say that wasn't there. You can actually see that you're not actually doing it. So if it's in computed and you're not doing it, then it's a browser default.
Okay.
9 times out of 10. Any other questions?
Yeah, Sam, part of my text is black before I highlight, before I hover over it. Like the part that says this will be a submenu and this is my first item.
Uh-huh.
Those are black on mine, whether I'm highlighting it or not.
Let's take a look here.
We changed several color whites, like the menu LIs to white. You have that?
That is the one I'm missing. Okay.
I'll go ahead and expand the CSS in case anyone needs to see that stuff again. I'm going to try and compress these a little bit. That way we can show a little bit more. All right, there's all of our menu styles right there. Kind of not formatted evenly, but still there.
Now, the one thing that you take away from the class is just the understanding that of the power. The power of CSS, what all you can do with it. Because there's plenty of resources on the internet that can tell you how to do something. You just need to know it's there to really go looking for it. If you walk away with the realization, oh, I know I can do that. If you know that you can do something, it's really easy to go out and find how to do it. Where if you don't even know it exists, then you're kind of in the dark that it's even available as a tool you can use.
Yeah, I didn't pick this stuff up in an afternoon. It took even you see me kind of fumbling here and there. It's because a lot of this stuff is kind of still new to me. And as far as like the specificity issues with using pseudo-classes and things like that, and the different behaviors, a lot of it's experimentation. But as long as you know the basics, you know that for each parent element that you want to represent in your selection statement, you need to separate it. You need to separate them with spaces. So like the menu there. From looking at that, you can tell the first element that the browser will look for is something with the ID menu. And then also from that bottom statement there, the next thing it will look for is a list item that has the pseudo-class hover on it. As long as you can read that and you understand that the hash mark means ID, the colon is used to represent pseudo-elements and pseudo-classes. If it's lacking anything like that, that it's an actual real element on the page. Then you can pretty much do anything with this cheat sheet and that knowledge. Fun little example. It doesn't even have to be a real element. Say I wanted to create a new tag and name it Sam's tag. Now, since the browser's not going to know anything about this tag, I'm going to give it a couple rules to display it with. I want it to work like a div, so I'm going to do display block. I want it to have no margins, 0 pixels. I want it to have a background color that is black. I want text represented within it to be white. And I want that text. Nope, that's not the right one at all. I want that text to be 1.5 times the size of its parent's font. Now I've given the browser a whole bunch of rules. Now I've given the browser a whole bunch of rules about how it needs to display this this new thing that I'm going to add to the page called Sam's tag. So I can go to any old spot on my tag. We'll go to our P tag. No, we'll actually won't put it in the red one. We'll put it up in the body, and we'll call it Sam's tag. This is my tag. I feel like Al Gore. And if I look at my page, the browser has taken the set of instructions that I've used to specify how Sam's tag needs to function, and it's applied them to the HTML element named Sam's tag. And it's because of that web programming and JavaScript, CSS, HTML, when used in tandem, are so incredibly powerful, because your imagination is really the limit to what you can actually produce. All right. So I'm going to take this full screen for you. Go back to displaying.
Another thing that's helpful too, if you're looking for a menu and you go out there and just look for HTML menus, you'll find a lot of different menu examples.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you grab that code and put it onto your page, hopefully when you look at it, you have a little bit of understanding of what they're trying to do. So if you can understand what someone's trying to do, that's the first step into being able to take somebody else's example and tweak it for your own use.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of this is actually coming out of memory from looking at menus for that Code Furnace site that I showed you, or that Jason showed you guys. I know it's obvious that I'm missing quite a few pieces. I've had a beer since then. But the basics are there. That is summed up in those lines right there are pretty much every real trick that you'll need to do up to some of the more advanced, and even understand some of the advanced CSS things. And on that cheat sheet is the rest of it. If you're looking for something in CSS that you want to know how to do, that cheat sheet's going to have it, because that's pretty much a listing of all of the big boys. The stuff that every browser will want to support, every new browser has to support. Otherwise, they won't get anyone wanting to use it, because websites look awful. And there's not a whole lot more in CSS3. This is the CSS cheat sheet CSS2. There's not a whole lot more in CSS3 aside from tweaking the general rules and adding a whole bunch more classes. Such as you can actually specify targets. Has anyone ever clicked a link on a website and it took them down to another place on the page? What that is an A tag that is specifying a target on the page. They represent that like this. Now this one will take you to the top of the page, because I haven't given it any sort of other place to go. No, I'm going to have to look this up, because it's been a while since I've done one of these. What is it? Anchor? Is that it? Is that one?
Is it? It's a bookmark.
Yeah.
Is it not a bookmark?
Well, it's.
I think it's just an A tag with an ID. Isn't it an A tag with an ID? Does anybody know?
That might be it. That might be it. Let's try that. Yeah. Let's go.
Yeah. bookmark a tag ID, or just bookmark a tag.
No, actually, I'm going to prefer the W3 schools because I know that they know what they're talking about. All right, so that's an example. That is targeting. That's not quite what we want. And we'll try that. Name. Yes, it is its name.
Oh, it's name, not ID. Okay.
So if I follow the example and do lower on my page, and spit out some BRs, kind of give it some a name equals lower on my page. You are here. All right. Now I've created my A tag with its name. I've created its pointer, for lack of a better term. So we're going to test it and see where it sends us.
And the pointer has to have that pound sign, right?
Yes, that hash symbol or pound sign means that you are going to be going somewhere else on the page. I can show you an example. Even if I were to type in a URL and suffix it with that hash, it's going to function just like that A tag does and take me clean to the bottom of the page. I don't want to see that when I first load my page, but I can always get back to it by clicking there. Now, you wonder, well, Sam, you were telling us about CSS3 styles, and you kind of went off on this tangent. Well, I went off on the tangent to show you the target CSS style. So if I have an A tag that is lovingly named, you are here, I want it to take on a specific behavior. I want to let the user, say I have 1,000 articles on this page, but they're not very long. So if I scroll to that part on the page, I can't count on the user to be able to find it right away. And that would mean extra work, which would make my site not as easy to use. So I'm going to give it a little bit of a flag to wave. So using the A element selector with the CSS3 pseudo-class element selector, or pseudo-class selector of target, I can apply a background color eventually to that. We'll make it brown. To that particular A tag that I'm targeting. This also works for divs. Divs, pretty sure any other element with the exception of breaks and horizontal rules, the HR tags and the BR tags. I don't think P's are spans. I don't think spans can accept them either. So we're just going to give an example of our long-running page here. And we're going to throw some BRs in there. So there, we've kind of lost our A tag in a sea of other ones. And we want to make sure that our user can find it. Now, as you can see, well, the browser kind of spoiled my surprise. So I'll reload my page. They all look the same. They all take on whatever behavior the style sheets decided to tell them until I click that. And now the one that I have just targeted with that A tag takes on the brown text and waves its flag, letting the user know that they need to look right there. All right?
And so once you do that A target, that's going to work on any A target anywhere.
Yeah. And it'll also, like say I'm pretty sure, pretty sure, we're going to try it. We're going to test this theory.
Oh, targeting a div instead of an A tag?
Yeah.
Huh.
And I don't think it works. Making a div a target. All right, someone else had this problem. And this looks like PHP. Oh, this is what we would refer to as a hack, using properties of another programming language to solve a problem with one that you're using. Just using two different languages, or even the same languages. Million ways to skin a cat. So you, the ones that kind of get a little crazy with mixing back end, front end, will, just refer to that group as hacks because they've been hacked together to sort of get it done. Not that they're bad. It's just your aim should always be to produce elegant code that is simple to read and understand. There we go. Oh. Well, unless you can't do it. I might have to look that one up. I actually looked it up on that computer in there. I'll have to look that one up and email you guys about it because I've actually seen people do it before. Or I was misunderstanding it completely. But for all intents and purposes, right now,
you
we
could wrap
know.
that in a div tag too.
Right. You're absolutely right.
You just have to have the A tag with it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I might even be able to try this. Let me see. This is also called a hack. That's the wrong one. Okay. Get our submenu. Nope.
It's just not taking on the target.
Right.
You try to, just idea it.
Try it. And the reason I'm removing this from the end is I don't want to refresh it and have it just scroll down my content rather than actually re-pull from the server. When Jason was mentioning that that mobile application, that was one of the issues I had with it, is that sort of reloading. All right, so it looks like, I mean, even if you just ID it, it still will behave like it's targeted. I guess divs just, so you meant try it as a div. Is that what you meant? And I just misunderstood you?
Well, I don't know if you could, if you need to have your selector with the ID, or do you just have ID by itself?
You know what?
You input div target. Is that it?
That is absolutely right. This, it will now do it on every type of element that you do. Yep. So it does work on divs when you code it correctly. And that was your section on debugging. All right, we've gone over everything really. Does anyone have any questions about what we went over? Like, is it possible? Give us something to do here.
Why don't you, if nobody has anything, create a blank page, go out, just find a menu that uses LI and ULs and that show them across.
Mm-hmm.
That way we can look at their styles and kind of pick apart how
Good
they
idea.
got their menu to work.
All right, we'll pull one of those out real quick. Playing with menus. And I just did the same thing I did to create that CSS. I right-clicked on the folder here, add new item, and HTML page. You can name it whatever you want. I don't think we'll be linking around
Those are
this.
some tutorials. Has anybody looked for tutorials on Visual Studios? Okay. Did you find one that was more helpful than the other?
New Boston, maybe?
New Boston? Okay. Did you have to pay for that, or was that free?
No, it was on YouTube. It's a series of, it's got all different lessons in different programming languages, but there's maybe 30-some lessons.
Okay.
5 to 6 minutes at a clip.
New Boston.
I think it was New Boston.
And it was targeted on learning Visual Studios?
Yes.
Excellent. I think that'd be very helpful. There's a lot you can do with Visual Studios, and if you take the time to go through some tutorials and some lesson plans, you'll be much further ahead than only if you only play with it. You can probably learn to do what you're trying to accomplish right then and there, but having a wide view that is going to accelerate what you can do with Visual Studios.
This site right here is actually where your cheat sheets came from. It's called cheatography.com. It's cheatography for spelling's sake. This is the HTML one that I gave you. You can find all kinds of different cheat sheets, basically, to well, from everything from kings and queens to JavaScript to SQL Server, CSS, French. But it's a really handy little site I found when I was actually coming up with the plan for this CSS class. So I actually had one, but I just lost it. Let me pull that back up. History. Okay. I found a site here called CSS Menu Maker. Looks like they have a good little mix. We'll go ahead and we'll do a drop-down menu. I'm going to pick one here that doesn't have a whole lot of fades, you know, and fancy edges, things like that, because usually those are consist of a lot of images, and that adds a little bit of a complexity when we just really want to show the guts of CSS. So I picked the one there. Here's kind of a sample of what we'll be using. And this site is cssmenumaker.com again, by the way, if you want to write that site down. So we're going to customize it, and just so that we can click Add button. just so that we can sort of get an idea of how everything's supposed to look, we want this one to be title menu 1 blank somewhere. No. And we can even preview. There's our menu 1. It will try and go somewhere, but we don't want it to. So keep editing.
It didn't give you the chance to download that one they had built
It did.
with all the subs?
I actually should try that one. Yeah, we'll try this one. Download source code. Because I don't know what did I do actually. Well, they got all kinds of hoops. So we'll copy
They
that.
couldn't just take it to that URL.
I know. Well, that would make it too easy, Jason.
They could add you to the spam list.
Yeah, absolutely right. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open up our source that we just sold our souls to download. And just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to drag it over into our project after creating a folder that I won't mind deleting later because it contains example code. So this is, we'll just for all intents and purposes call this test. So we'll copy these items over into our test folder. Poof, there they are. And we'll open the example page that they've given us. All right. We can see when we walk into this page that they have included an external style sheet using the link tag. You know, it says it's a style sheet. Tells us where it's supposed to be located. There it is. Tells us what type it is. And we're going to also open that style sheet and use our Visual Studio's ability to show several bits of code at the same time to actually take a look at both of these at the same time. Alright, so we go into the menu and we see that it's a lot similar to what we were using above. They have a div, they used a class instead of an ID, ULs with A tags, and sub-ULs, all pointing to various locations. When we look at our style sheet, we have our dot menu. They've turned off the border, set its size to 0 pixels, set margins, padding, font sizes, and all that. And then they start getting into formatting the unordered lists, and furthermore the list items, applying various floats and paddings to that. Then the actual A tag transformations take place here. They do have one image, a separator. We could see that in a little line. As you can see, it kind of flashed in there. It's in between each one. And the best part is, because we've got all this brand new knowledge, we can change things. I seem to like yellow today, so that's going to be the one. So now,
did anybody catch that text as it displayed on the page a millisecond before the style sheet kicked in? Without the style sheet, it was just text going straight down inside a regular list.
Mm-hmm. There was also, oh well, no, it made a liar of me. Yeah, that's all styles. Impressive. Okay, so, and how they get them to show like that are using this display property and the hover.
Does display block how they get them side by side?
No, that's actually float.
That's the float. Okay.
Float is, I've seen it right there.
Float to the
Left.
left.
And as you can see, the ULs try to go to the left side of whatever element they're within. This is the div itself.
Okay.
That they've applied I can show you in Firebug. Go ahead and duck. If we look here, here's our div, or that's our outermost UL. And the LIs within it, which have been assigned a float to the left of how that UL is being displayed. So if I click on that UL and I go ahead and hit style, I see that UL is getting a set height, and it's receiving font from its parent. Now ULs will always try and fill out whatever they're in, and because the div, the menu div, doesn't have any height specification, it will try and also fill out its parent, which is the body, whose height is specified by the window size.
If you put an X by the float, will it automatically put them in a top-down?
Absolutely it will. I shouldn't say that before I try it. Go to find the style. Where was it? There it was. There. So right here you see is the default behavior of an unordered list. Whatever's in the LIs get displayed one after another after another after another, going down the page. When you apply the float style, they start to ignore each other, and they ignore that rule of always stacking one after the other. They don't clear each other. Or excuse me, they do clear each other. When you apply float, it stops them from clearing one another. And I mean clear as in the usage of the word if you were driving a big truck and you cleared the underneath of a bridge. That's actually a style to force things to go underneath. Like if I were to clear, and I think I'll try and make something. Yeah. If I tell it to clear left, it behaves again. I've just counteracted my float left by forcing it to always clear what's to the left. Now I don't want to do that because that's not how we want our menus to look. And as you can see, they no longer take part in deciding how big the UL is supposed to be. With the float turned off, they take part in deciding how big the UL is supposed to be. If I turn float on, then the UL doesn't care how big they are. They're floating all on their own. Still constrained within the UL, but they aren't. Their size doesn't matter. All right. So these right here are some clever use of display. I'll try and show you one cool little thing here about Firebug. Which one did I select? Let's see if I can get one. Yeah. You see that? Over in the Style tab there? watch right in here. You see how the pseudo-classes are being applied by the browser? So now the hover takes them into effect and it gets rules from it. Let me just go back over there and see that now that I'm hovering over that LI, it takes on display block, which shows it again. Because when this is not being shown, it gets the display none. Or not. Where is the display none coming from? That's the one I should be showing you. That's a lot less confusing. I'm just trying to find a good example of what I'm trying to show you with it displaying and then not displaying anymore. I'm not finding that, so I'm going to move on and show you another feature of Firebug. Now, if you look over in my markup here, it's showing a bunch of ULs and list items in accordance to what we saw in that source code that we looked at. And if you'll notice, I don't know how well you can see it on the TV, but these LIs are darker, or excuse me, grayed out, almost lighter than the LIs up here. And when I mouse over them, you don't see the elements react on the page, and you know the appropriate thing become highlighted. And that's because they are not presently visible. And Firebug will let you see that in the markup that you're actually looking at, so that you can test against changing visibility of your elements with CSS. Is there anything anyone wants to see on this, or questions, anything like that? These
the GoToMeeting folks, if they have anything.
Jim, still with us?
Yeah.
Following along all right?
LIs there? They're not visible.
Say that one more time. I didn't quite hear you.
The LIs there that aren't visible. They're not, like, you know.
Can we see how they're displayed? Yeah, it doesn't change them when you're actually selecting it. That might be a drawback to the actual to Firebug software. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I think if I hide it and then, see, it's not even going to let me do that. Let's figure out where we're being hidden from. Alright, so we have menu, li, and float, none, margin, left display block. There's our none. Alright, so I hit that menu, li, ul, and I mouse over it, and something has to be changing to actually cause it to behave differently.
Are you looking for the hover style?
Yeah, I'm looking for where the hover is getting applied, or where the display is getting applied for those ones. But I'm kind of thinking oh, there we go. There it is. If you look at the top of the style, you see .menu li : hover ul. Changes it to display block. And if you look at the one just beneath it, menu li ul, the display none is being overridden by that because the one above it is more specific. It's using the extra pseudo class in there.
So the whole submenu is part of that li. So as long as you stay in the submenu, you're also in the hover of the parent element.
Right, and they actually, that problem that I was having with the menu I was making on the fly there, they actually used that to produce this menu. So sometimes when you're coding something, it helps to look at someone else's example so you can see if maybe you were fighting against something that could be helping you if you use it correctly. Did that answer your question, Jim?
Yeah.
Okay.
Josh, you were gonna ask something.
I was just thinking, like I like menus when you go to the page and you still have an indication that you're at that in a menu and what page you're on.
Breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
Well, let's see if see that's actually a little bit more tricky to do with just CSS, but we will look and see if we can. And the full, what I've seen it called the most is a breadcrumb navigation. And we'll see, looks like Google has a suggestion for CSS. Do you know you can make triangles? So we'll go ahead and take a look at this demo. It looks like we can do exactly that. Oh, that is a fancy view source. So we take a look at his styles here, and in his HTML, he has. You guys, can you see that? Guys, see this? Okay. I know it's like not very good contrast. Yeah, let me actually move this into our example, one of our
If you
examples.
clicked on one of those, did it keep it highlighted?
No, not like Visual Basic. That was just me happened to move it. Yeah, let me take this view source into Visual Studio, and we'll actually take a look at it in execution. So this is another really good site I've used before, the CSS-tricks.com. If you know, I may be a super nerd for admitting that I do this, but I've gone into these sites and I've just kind of looked through some of the little toys that people have created, and that's what I'm like, oh, I didn't know you could use that style to make a shadow underneath of a div. That's incredible. And it's those little things that you think about, and then when you're coding, you're like, oh, I remember you could put a shadow under that, and that looked incredible. So you just go back and you find that code and you get it applied when you actually need it. Can't build something on the web if you haven't seen it before. Okay, so before I went off on a tangent just there, I was showing something. So we're done playing with test. I'll make sure that gets zipped up and sent to you guys so you guys can have a look at everything there. We're going to add a new folder, breadcrumb, nav. And within that, another HTML page, breadcrumbs. Ooh, we are just all kinds of windows over here. Alright, there's our page. We're going to paste in the source code that we grabbed out off that other page. It's just a same page style sheet. Looks like this one's actually utilizing a jQuery library, so it's not pure CSS.
Let me explain to you, in case you haven't caught this yet. You can link to CSS and JavaScript pages that belong to another site. You can also embed images into your website that belong to another site. Your source can point to anywhere on the internet. It's not limited to just the files and folders underneath your project. there's a lot of people that create, jQuery libraries. They create a bunch of code out there that you can actually attach to without having a copy of all that code in your project.
Let's see. This is an ad. Buy, sell ads, yeah. Sorry, themes. What I'm doing right now is I'm actually reading through and seeing if there's anything we can cut out of this to make it a little easier to look at. But let's take a look at what he handed us to see if we like that as an example. All right. So there's our CSS triangle breadcrumbs. I think what they actually use is they use one of the tricks of corner rounding in jQuery to actually get this little triangular effect. So we can test that after we remove that ad. So we have an ad, BSA, ad packs. So we know that CSS triangle breadcrumbs is the marker of where we actually, enjoy the code. So these other divs we can probably safely remove and not actually affect the example that we're trying to look at. So let's do that. And as you can see, we have our CSS breadcrumbs with less confusing markup. They have a UL. Now this would be something you generate with back-end code. Excuse me. When you're loading your page, you have that back end code knows where you're actually sitting, and we'll get into this probably next week. Being able to load these things up in the back end of your page when your user actually runs to your page. So what they've done is they've generated, or they have list items here with A tags in them, and they have a sort of hierarchical view of their sitemap all the way down to where you're supposedly looking at a 1989 VW Westphalia. And that is all of the HTML markup that they actually need to produce this this beautiful looking breadcrumb. If we snip out, here's another thing you can remember when you're looking at source code. The elements I had earlier were prefixed a lot with this BSA. So usually when you see prefix shared like that, it's a safe bet that they aren't going to get hurt if you remove them. If you like, say you removed elements that were causing troubles, you can usually pretty safely remove matching or similar looking scripts and style tags to sort of clean out the code that doesn't actually matter to you. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm actually just commenting out the bad scripts. Google Analytics and that probably aren't of any use to us. I actually don't even think this is using the jQuery UI at all. So in an effort to experiment with it, I'm going to comment out all of the other scripts, and then we're going to see if I broke it. So hopefully, if this is truly an elegant solution of a CSS solution, it's going to only need this in order to produce that awesome looking breadcrumb. Here goes nothing. Success. So, with no JavaScript, we've produced a oddly shapen elements and strung them together to form a cohesive picture of where the user is on the website. And I think it even is taking control of the colors, because I didn't see where it was actually specifying any other colors. So if I go here and I do that, I think it will actually get angry.
Well, it actually started to take the shade down, got all the way to the bottom, and
Yes.
then defaulted back to the home.
Yeah, it seems
So
like
it did drop. It did drop down one more than
Mhm.
what we had before.
yeah. I
it looks
think
like.
if we zoom out,
Because you have the white.
right, and it's also, here's another thing. It's also wrapping, and that causes an issue with it. Now, because we've learned so much about CSS, we know that since this is a CSS-based thing, we can play around with it and keep it from wrapping. So let's take a look at this overflow, which doesn't seem to be having an effect. Oh, yes, it is. Oh, that's the one. We need to add a style called white space no wrap. Now that should be enough to tell us to not wrap. So we're still getting some wrapping. Ooh. You know what? I think that actually needs to be applied to the div. So let's try it. White space, no wrap. Oops. So we're still getting some wrapping. But you can kind of see how you're able to just play around with what actually goes on inside of these to try and see if you can solve issues of like wrapping and things like that. I actually think this has to do something with the float. And we can try playing around. I don't know that this will work. I'm just experimenting at this point. Yeah.
You can set a width of your div to force it a certain width.
That's true, but I think what's happening is even though the div's not trying to wrap, however, the window itself is compressing them.
Okay.
Because they will behave, even when you're floating elements, they will try and behave.
If they're floating, the div's not really containing them.
Right.
Okay.
So what we might want to try, and this is, all part of the development process. Try it till it works. Overflow is another interesting CSS property. It allows you to control what happens when the contents of, say, a div are being asked to change their display outside of the div's bounds. So it has a few options. It has overflow none. It has hidden, scroll, which will actually cause scroll bars to, it won't change the size of the div, but it will scroll them, and visible, which will actually stretch the div, and that's actually the default. So we're going to hide our overflow and see if that doesn't solve our, it doesn't solve our problem. And this UL already has it, so I don't think with the technology that is currently running this thing that we can actually avoid that particular bug. So in the event that you actually hit something like that when you're developing something, we spent maybe like 5-10 minutes kind of fiddling around. If you spend more time than that on a UI element, trying to get it to fit, and it looks great in one state, like when it's all the way wide. Well, maybe you need to rethink how you're displaying that. Like I added camper vans ×4 to that, and so I would be led to believe that. I mean, another thing is the CSS stopped fading as well, so that there's kind of limitations that I need to keep in mind when I'm using that. So maybe I should start cutting off the other end to show them the end of the breadcrumbs versus the beginning, because they're more likely to want to go a couple pages back than they would want to go all the way back to the home. And even in that case, I would have a menu above in case they wanted to go all the way back to home from the end of that breadcrumb trail. So I mean, don't spend a whole bunch of time when you get something looking good trying to repair, or trying to get it to fight user actions. Usually those are cases where you need to look at how you designed it to try and solve any flaws with how the user is going to use it, with showing less, or adding scroll bars, or giving some sort of other feedback or cue to the user.
Can you see if you can find how they did that fading?
Yes.
Because looking at all those LI elements, they're all, there's no class to them or anything, so.
They use, this is what they do here. They actually kind of hacked it. It's not dynamic at all.
Okay.
They use the nth child. I believe that's a pseudo-element.
And child 2 and child
2A after, and then they grab the third one. Nth child is basically, get the third one in the list. It's used to describe a piece of a collection. And what they've done here is this is actually representing a color using hue values. So you start out, I think, what is HSLA? I'd have to honestly look it up. But you can also use like RGB, and you can provide values for red, green, blue to actually produce a fully blown color without using any hex markup or HTML like
That's
yellow,
why we
red.
stopped getting colors, because we ran out of their hat. So they only accounted for 7 deep, and when we went beyond that, it started to fail.
And I know of a way to actually capture that nth and sort of like create a loop, as it were, to calculate, this child used this value plus this value. But whatever works. If it works, it works. So if you're going to spend 4 hours creating a super complex mod that always takes a set number or any number of LIs and creates this glorious, beautiful thing that you'll probably only use 10% of the time, then you need to rethink what you're trying to do. And maybe in those cases, a hack is something that's going to work better for what you want. It's all about time, because you can only code as much as you can stay awake in a day. And these help, but they're not always recommended over long periods of time. Is there anything else anyone wanted to see? All right. Well, it's 9 o'clock, and so that kind of concludes our CSS tutorial. We'll next week is the intro to ASP.NET. We'll be talking to servers and.
Is it, or is it database?
Database is after that.
Okay, so the ASP.NET is just some coding on the background.
Yeah, just back-end code, form load. Basically is, utilizing some of the tricks that you learned last week with events that the server fires when you're loading your page. And you'll find out what events are next week. If you want to look them up, just server-side events would be the Google search that you'd want to go for. All right, thanks for coming, guys. Jim, did you have any questions before we, finished up?
I think I'm good for.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close down the GoToMeeting. I know I've been kind of slow getting the videos up, guys, and I apologize for that. I'm going to get that started before I even leave tonight, and that way it'll be done by the time I come in tomorrow. All right. Were you going to say something, Jim?
I think I'm done. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay.